Hey, and welcome to the Digital Architect. I'm Bruce van Zyl. On today's episode, I am joined by Ryan Singer, who's the author of Shape Up and has been an inspiration to our team as far as how we work and how we organize projects. And so I reached out to Ryan maybe a couple weeks ago, and we just started kicking some emails back and forth. And we're a dev shop kind of implementing Shape Up. He's the author of this and has years of experience in it. And so we said, hey, let's have a discussion. It's going to be kind of casual. I'm going to ask him some questions. He's probably going to ask me some questions, and we'll go from there. So thanks, Ryan, for jumping on here.
Hey, Bruce, thanks a lot for having me.
Awesome, awesome. And if you guys are watching live, drop comments below. We'll keep an eye on that. If you have questions that pop up, I'll try and field those, and maybe we can get those in the loop here. So, yeah, maybe just a good place to start, Ryan. Just for those who don't even know what we're talking about as far as shape up goes, what just maybe a 3 to 5 minutes, kind of just on what is shape up, what makes it unique, and then we can go from there.
Sure, yeah. Well, I wrote Shape Up when I was at Basecamp, and I was there for nearly 18 years. And we had experienced all kinds of the different pain points that other companies experience too, like from growing from 3 people in the beginning to nearly 60. And when you're if you have just a few people and they are quite skilled, then you don't need a lot of coordination, you don't need a lot of process. You can just kind of sit together and things just happen almost by magic, right? But then as you start to grow, as you start to bring in more people with different levels of skill and stuff like that, then it becomes a challenge of how do we actually kind of structure somehow what we do, and especially how do we do it in a way where we can continue to get the results that we used to get when we were really small and everything was really tight. So we started to notice things like projects taking longer than they should, not being able to explain kind of the black magic of why the project would go so well when certain people were making certain decisions along the way. And so Shape Up was actually kind of my effort to synthesize all the stuff that we had figured out through trial and error, going through the years of adjusting our process into something that we could actually kind of explain to ourselves, and also kind of walk people through as they came into the company so that we could say, this is how we work. And especially it solves the problem of not being able to get that focus where everybody knows everybody knows what they're trying to do. They're all concentrated on the same goal. And we want to be able to actually set a goal from the business side where we say, like, this is the thing that we want to ship. This is the thing that's valuable to us, and actually know that in 6 weeks, which is the main cadence that we're working with inside of the Shape Up method, after 6 weeks, we're actually going to ship that thing, and we're going to celebrate the fact that we got to that strategic goal that we wanted.
Yeah,
There's a
it's
lot
a
of
hard.
companies out there who are kind of chipping away at things 2 weeks at a time, and there's just no end to it.
Right.
And there's frustration on the developer side because it just kind of feels like a treadmill of tickets. And there's a lot of frustration on the business side because it feels like, why can't we accomplish the things that we know are important to us? So really, it's all about kind of how to do that.
That's awesome. Fantastic. And we now it's been out for a couple of years, but we somehow only stumbled into it middle of last year. And so I read the book and I said, this is kind of the way I think we should be moving forward as a team. And so our whole team went through it. We did a weekly book club, and chapter by chapter just burned through the whole thing. And it was fascinating to see how I think it's one of the few solutions that ties in the business side, the kind of creative side, the product and engineering, kind of all. It's kind of the intersection of all of that. Because a lot of workflows and processes that we've tried working for clients, doing development projects, it gets so technical so fast that it's very easy for clients who aren't technical to make informed business decisions.
Hmm.
And one thing I really love about the process is you basically are taking all the complexities and kind of taking the time, which is huge, taking a lot more time in the front end to organize, structure the project, and get it simple enough and kind of explain it clearly enough that clients can understand it and everybody on the team kind of has some buy-in. We can all
Yeah.
understand the constraints. We can understand where this project ends, what's out of bounds. It makes it clear. And that just builds confidence in the clients. And I think that's been a huge asset for us when we are taking a pitch essentially, and then we have to sell that pitch to someone. Someone has to pay for that. So we have to explain it to them. And if the clients understand it and it's clear and they can see the thought process, they're much more likely to buy into that, to trust you, to because they've got confidence now, right?
That's actually a really key point. You know, the one thing that I always noticed, I was always paying attention to different design methodologies and, you know, like ways of working and stuff like that since back in 2003 when I started at Basecamp. And I always saw this pattern, you know, like these big firms would have this like process, like first we
Mm-hmm.
discover, and then we, I don't know, ideate, and then we,
Yeah.
you know, and what I understood was that actually like all of these words, they didn't really mean anything in terms of cause and effect. What they meant was like we have really smart people and they come up with ideas and then they build them.
Right.
And and the thing is that like when you are actually faced with making trade-offs of how much time can I actually spend on this? How much money can I actually spend on this? Like what are we going to do in the next few weeks versus like this versus that? Like you can't just say we're going to go do discovery and not
Right.
have any idea of where it leads and what it actually means, you know? And a lot of this is about, for example, so like, you know, flipping estimates into appetites and saying,
Yeah.
what is it worth for us in terms of weeks to spend on this problem? And doing shaping up front, meaning like, do we actually know what the path that we're going to take roughly looks like? Do we actually understand what we're getting into here? Or are we just throwing hours at something, kind of hoping that what comes out is going to be good? And
Yeah.
I was actually really excited to get your message when you suggested that we could talk here a little bit about using Shape Up with clients, because
Right.
it's interesting because, you know, like with I think working with a client, the pressure is even higher to somehow set expectations about what are we
Right.
actually doing here. And at the same time, I never got to use Shape Up with clients when we were developing it. You know, actually, I've since been able to do that a little bit, but I'd love to hear kind of what was there anything that you had to adapt or anything
Yeah.
that you had to change in order to make it make sense in that world?
Yeah. I think the difference. So reading the book, it was written kind of in the context of I don't know, full time team. You've got
Yeah,
kind of leadership that is full time. We're all kind of and we're all building one product, right?
right.
So the way that we kind of worked around it was we now have multiple kind of leadership teams, right? That are these clients that are giving us kind of objectives and things to go tackle. And so it took us a while to figure this out because we tried to take our team and say, okay, we'll all kind of serve each of the clients together, and that just didn't work in the beginning. And so now what we've done is we kind of have these little micro teams. It's a developer, a product person, or kind of product manager, and then not a project manager. That's the key,
Hmm.
product manager. And then I'll kind of jump in to help waste on time. So it's kind of a small team. We only do a handful of clients at a time, and that developer, that product, that's all they think about is that one client. So they've kind of got their
Uh-huh.
own little mini team, right, with the leadership, the clients kind of giving objectives, and we can kind of work with them directly, and it creates a tremendous amount of speed. That was one thing I didn't anticipate because it feels when you first start it, and I'm a quick start. I love to just launch and just get into it, and we'll figure it out. Um, but and so me taking time to write the ideas down, to put all this, it felt slow in the beginning,
Hmm.
but actually, like when you look at it and you stand back a little bit, we were able to get through a lot more work in a shorter amount of time.
So doing the upfront
Yeah,
work of shaping felt
yeah.
like slowing down at first.
At first, for
Uh-huh.
someone who's like,
Uh-huh.
I could get an idea. This is the bad habits we had before, and I could probably speak to a lot of founders in the sort of tech spaces. You get the idea at 3 a.m. and go into Slack and you just start throw it over the wall to someone and say, "Hey, now we're gonna do this thing." And so developer wakes up in the morning and oh, I guess we're working on this task now.
Right.
Um, that's
And
the
it's kind
worst
of
way
like
to build.
straight to code too, right? The idea
Straight
is
to
that
code. Yeah,
somehow
no,
you're going to go
no.
from actually it's like from shower to code.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's actually really
Exactly.
interesting. That's one of the things I've been working on a lot lately is debugging problems that come from going to code too fast.
Yes.
Because a lot of the times too, what happens when we go straight into code is we don't have any kind of an overview about where the unknowns are and where the risks are. And then we're kind of like knee deep in a bunch of half-written code before we start to realize, like, I don't even know what I'm actually working on right now. And I can't see the bigger picture of like what's important with how I spend my time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, my team's listening to this right now, so they may be saying like, I still have the bad habit of doing that, but it's caused us to think very deeply about these projects, like you say. It's and we use the analogy of building a house, right?
Hmm.
If you had a contractor working on any part of your house and you just walk in on each morning, and you're like, now I want to build this bathroom. Okay, now I want to build this kitchen. Okay, now I want to build a second. I want to build out from the second story to, and they're like, and a awesome developer is just trying to like make it work, and it just you quickly end up with all this technical debt that you now at some point have to go and undo. And so that's where we always take that step back and say, okay, let's shape up, let's create the room essentially for the house. Okay, so let's figure out, is this a bathroom, is it a kitchen, is it a bedroom?
Hmm.
Because each of these require different plumbing, electrical, it needs different structural foundation. And so that's where you're saying the discovery process, we do have a discovery process, but it is kind of walking clients through the shape up process. And we take about 2 weeks for a new client. It's a paid project. We spend
Hmm.
2 weeks with them, and we basically like try to isolate and summarize how many of these different core modules. So we do take kind of a step back, pull up like maybe two or three, maybe four ideas. We try to put those into small projects with the general. Is this 2, 4, 6 weeks? Never bigger than 6 weeks. And then
Hmm.
let them take a step back. And now we have fixed pricing for 2, 4, 6 weeks. So they can look
Oh,
at a
that's
2 week
cool.
project and they say, everybody on the team knows that costs X. And the developers know what 2 weeks means. The clients know what 2 weeks mean. It simplifies everything. We can all talk the same language. And we're
And
never,
when you say that they all know what 2 weeks means, is that because the thing is done after the 2 weeks? Do you know what I mean? Like, because there are
yeah.
a lot of companies work 2 weeks at a time. So how is this different?
So yeah, after 2 weeks, it's completely like, it's shipped, right? We're going to put it into the hands of
Uh-huh.
clients, which is a very big difference than I'm going to spend 80 hours, 40 hours each week working on this project and then it be done. Because typically most development shops would then, after 2 weeks, hand it off to the client to start reviewing and start testing and QA. Whereas in ShapeUp, we're testing it early on, and we're doing
Hmm.
QA and we're iterating on it, within the first couple days. Um, so that's what makes it a little bit different, and everybody is incentivized to keep to that 2 weeks. This is a little bit where I think it's a little easier for us than maybe for a company. Is that if we run over to 2 to 3 weeks, like basically the company pays for that, right? The clients aren't paying for it.
That's the
So
cool thing about about working
yeah.
for clients. You feel the consequences of overruns in a way that product companies seldom do. But also, I mean, of course, the funding model is totally different too. If a lot of product companies have investment money and they are not very cost aware to begin with,
Yeah.
and you're kind of on the other extreme, like very, very cost aware. I think that's great because that's the pressure that helps everybody. It's that enables people to make trade-offs and say, what do we actually want and what is important to us? It's actually having that wall of time and money around the effort that motivates the
Hmm.
shaping.
Yeah. And I think, you know, some things we've introduced around that to create that hard wall is that, and this is even something we implemented in the last, I would say 2 months, is we do track time, right? Because it is gives us another measure of unit of measure for these projects.
Hmm.
So we will take a 2 week project and call that 60 hours ish of work, right? And we're not working total 40 hours, about 30 hours. And that could be split between multiple people. Me, our product manager, our developer, and so we do track kind of at the end of the first week. Okay, did we spend 30 hours? Did we spend 40 hours? And so it does help us because we do kind of these weekly check-ins with the client, and we'll just say, hey, here's 2 week project. we're 40 hours in, we've got 20 hours to go. And it does help them say, okay, we're used up this much budget. And because the worst thing, they don't want to come and pay another batch of work to do the same thing we just agreed to do
Right.
for X. We don't want to now charge them X plus whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that creates this hard stop where we say, hey, look, it's what we got 20 hours left. You know, this little new idea or bug presented itself halfway through the project. We could either go
Mm-hmm.
left, we could go right. We've got 20 hours. Each way is going to take 20 hours. Which way do you want to go? And so
Mm-hmm.
we have to kind of lead clients in this process. And the only way to do that to help them take it seriously is to attach dollar signs to it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of a
Yeah.
sudden,
That's
especially
great.
when we're working with founders, everybody gets real clear when money's involved, right?
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually one of the things that I like, I've enjoyed so much about working with all of this is that it's about actually, it's oftentimes putting discipline onto the leadership more than it is, because
Yes.
there's a lot of companies that try to put discipline on their engineers, for example, by telling them that they have to report in certain ways, that they have to put certain attributes onto their tickets and stuff like that, and just pushing it all onto the programmers actually doesn't solve the problem. Actually, the
Hmm.
it's you get so much leverage out of having discipline on the business side of what's important here. How do we want to spend this
Yeah.
time? Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you a couple questions just to get
Yeah.
some context. Like, um, can you tell me a little bit about like what do clients come to you for, and like what is an engagement with them like? Kind of what do they get at the end?
Right. So this has been refined and has continued to get refined, but we typically have clients come word of mouth. They hear about us. We do an initial kind of 30-minute discovery call. So that's just free. It's just us getting to know them, see if there's something here. We'll find out what's the problem they're trying to solve. You know, everybody comes that they need an app, right? Everybody starts with the fact that they need an app. Not
Okay.
everybody needs an app. Some people need a website. Some people just need to use a tool that's out there that they don't know. So we try to make sure we're not reinventing the wheel, that we are doing something actually. So we're already starting to think like, is this even necessary, right? What
Mm,
they're asking for, or is it just that they don't have anyone technical on their team, and they didn't know that this other solution exists? And so sometimes
mm,
on those 30 minutes, I'll just point them to a solution and say, hey, you know, I think you could do this yourself by pulling these two or three little products
mm-hmm,
together or services. Now we'll happily like entertain that and build your own version of Trello if that's what you need. And sometimes the use
mm-hmm,
case does require it because there's constraints in existing tools. But I'm a huge fan of leveraging what's out there at the beginning. And so 30 minutes at the end of that call, I just say, hey, if you want to work with us, this is, you know, we have a discovery project. It's a fixed price. And we work for 2 weeks, and we jump on some kind of, now we do everything kind of live, right, with the clients, because we're trying to educate, shape up. We're trying to do the process and let them see the process kind of behind the
mm-hmm.
scenes so they can get up to speed faster. So we actually jump on this like 2 hour Zoom call, and it's a, you know, we'll kick ideas around, we'll pull everything up. Um, Full disclosure, we we run our entire business in Notion. We tried a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different solutions. Notion just worked really well for documentation and estimates, and everything happens inside of this. We've built out some cool templates. If you guys are interested, I'd be happy to share like a link for you to duplicate our templates in the description. But um, so we pull this in. They can start to see these modules start to appear, and we've just list everything sort of in an idea column. So this whole process is just trying to see like how big is this going to go? Like, because we're trying to just figure out, almost like in the house analogy, how big is the property need to be? Like, is this going to be
Uh-huh.
a high rise? Is it going to be a ranch home? Is it going to be a mansion? Like, do you need 5 acres? Do we need half an acre? You know, what are we even kind of looking at this point? So just trying to get an idea, and it helps. So we're sort of discovering how big is this is. At the same time, the clients are starting to get an idea of like, okay, wow, this could be 3 to 6 week projects, and that just translates to a certain dollar amount. And so and they know that kind of as we're going through the process. And so by the end of that first call, we kind of have a rough idea of what we're doing. We'll go back as a team and kind of flesh out any of those ideas. And that's where we really define the problem. We put in the solution, define some rabbit holes, out of bounds. What does success look like? And we've got a template we put our fat marker sketches and stuff into that, and then come back a week later and present that to the client and say, hey, here's project A, here's project B,
Uh,
C, and
so
then yeah.
at the end of this 2 week discovery project, the deliverable is a set of kind of pitches of
It's
like potential projects.
Yeah, so it's a set of pitches as here's probably the next few steps we would take. We're only allowed to pick one, right? You can't go
Uh-huh.
pick three pitches. It's one at a
Uh-huh.
time, and we try to limit the amount to no more than 6 weeks collected. So it could be like 1 2 week project, 1 4 week, as far as what they're paying for in a batch. And one of the powerful things, I'm just giving away all our secrets. So if you're running a dev shop, like this is some, we should be running a mastermind for this. But um, we essentially we take that entire pitch and we add it as an addendum like to our contract, and so it locks everything in as far as what we're building, what kind of how what's out of bounds, all of that. So we have a general standard kind of contract that we have them sign, but then as part of it, all the work and the scope of work and everything is defined in this pitch. And so we will sometimes do a batch of a collective of 6 weeks. They'll pay for that in one batch, and then that way we like to get the money out of the way as soon as possible. Because I think the way that this works is clients, we get them to pay. Everything's up front, by the way. I know if you're dev, so there's a lot of creative ways to do that, but that's a game changer. It's not a 50% deposit, and then when you finish it, because then you have a 6 week project and they're not really happy, and so then it runs to 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and now you're on the line for any additional hours. So
I
that
love
just
the
lock.
logic of that. It's
Yeah.
like you're paying for the capacity and then
Yes.
you're taking your yeah, that's very good.
Cool. And so yeah, we have them, and then that way, because what happens is we want to dive into the work, right? We want to have that
Yeah.
leadership. We want to have the developer. We want everybody kind of kicking these ideas back and forth and all being on the same page all the time. And that shape up process allows us to keep looking back at the original pitch and saying, okay, wait, was this was this one of the scopes of one of the features we had identified, and kind of keep that as sort of the North Star through the whole process. And then we know when the work is done, right? Because it meets the success criteria, it meets the solution we presented, and we can kind of stop. Um, and so there are some challenges in that. So as the original question was like, what are the deliverables? We kind of go through this shaped up process, and then we will do kind of the first couple projects, and then typically clients just keep working with us for 4 to 6 months as we develop kind of their whole solution. But
Uh-huh.
we try to
Yep.
get it out in the hands of their clients within that first 6 weeks, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And then you build that trust that you're capable of delivering stuff. So then that feeds into future cycles.
Right. And it's because just because someone's willing to pay you for work doesn't mean you should be working for their money. um, so just because, so that discovery process is as much for us as it is for them, because like you said, the leadership component is critical. If we can, and typically we're working with small teams. It's not, and we actually define like our ideal client has 5 to 10 employees, and so we don't want to have this huge structure and teams going back to other stuff. You're just never gonna be able to implement this kind of sideways into massive organization like that. We've been a part of lots of those. It's not fun. They move slow. It's hard to. They never change all those good things. Um, but we tried to work with have the founder at least on a couple of those discovery calls, because they're the ones that, and if they don't get it, if they don't understand, okay, there's these different modules. Here's how it's going to get built. Every time I have an idea, it gets thrown in. We capture it in the ideas. So we have this long, like, we do actually keep a backlog. I know that's probably one of the rules we break, but for the founder, they throw an idea, and I was like, hey, one day I want to be able to have this one functionality, we throw that in a backlog and they can see it. And sometimes we never go back to it, right? It's just
Hmm.
there. And every time they mention it, we're like, hey, yeah, it's still here. Did you want us to shape this up for you? Um, and then we'll
That's
go
actually
off.
the perfect
Yeah.
use of a backlog. That's like backlog done right is a way to uh, it's a way to act upon information that came on that came in, you know, and as long as you have accurate expectations about it, that we don't just draw from the backlog to fill in capacity, right? But that it's
Right.
just it's a
Yeah.
source of something that we could look at if we're having a discussion about what to do, but that there's no automatic conveyor belt from the backlog into resourcing, you know. By the way, I really
Totally.
like what you said about uh, well, what it made me think of was that sh- really, when you really understand shaping, and what I'm seeing is that it's easier to see it in the example of working with a client. Shaping actually should feel like a negotiation.
Yes.
It should feel like many different parties. Like, what is the thing that we're trying to do from a product standpoint? What is the thing that we're willing to spend from a cost standpoint? What is technically feasible or even desirable from an implementation standpoint? Like, all of those things have to come together into some package where like all these viewpoints are coming together and saying yes before they make the commitment. And I
Yeah.
also really like how it's interesting how like you have this 2 week discovery process, and that basically culminates in a betting table. And they've paid for the time to do the
Hmm.
shaping work to get to a betting table, but then you're explicitly kind of making a bet together about how do we want to
Right.
use the time that we have looking forward. That's really cool.
Yeah. And I think, um, and this is what's powerful about Shape, that process is taking the time um, to to uh, to actually like produce a document. Just that process is so powerful because it forces you to think so much more deeply about the problem.
Hmm.
And again, we've saved so many weeks worth of development. Like you said, the shower to code. That should be like a book title, I think.
Yeah, like
Um,
shower to code is like the easiest way to blow money and time.
yes,
Like it's
and
just like it seems fast and it's unbelievably wasteful and expensive and risky.
yes, yeah, and you can continue, and the I'll say one of the clients' objections when we're in that discovery sales process and when they're putting their first money towards giving a development company is they have the fear is I'm going to just pour tens hundreds of thousands of dollars into this product and then still not be happy with what the
Exactly.
result is. And so
Hmm.
and that's kind of where clients have been burned. They've outsourced stuff. They're
Hmm.
try to
Totally.
save a buck here or there, and they do it the wrong way. And
Totally.
so anyway,
It's an interesting
yeah,
case where, like, actually, a lot of the time, as a client, they'll shop around and they're going to hear, yes, 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 we can do that from a
yes,
lot of people. And here the conversation actually kind of starts with a no.
that's
Like,
so powerful. Yeah,
you know, and telling a potential client, giving them a constructive no builds so much trust in the beginning because you're not just trying to get that money and you know what I mean, and get a contract signed. You're really
yeah,
trying uh, to shape something where you can kind of promise some satisfaction at the end of it, where you can actually have some common understanding about the outcome and the path to get there. But okay, I want to ask you
yeah,
a question
yeah, yeah.
about this. Specifically, what what do these pitches look like? What do you actually call them if not pitches?
Hmm.
And what's the level of concreteness in
Yeah.
that commitment? You know, like how much room is there for what you actually do to change from what's written there? Like, can you
So
paint a little bit of a picture of that?
yeah, I think this is where we have to speak the same language as clients, right? So the hour unit is phenomenal here because it just creates a finite amount of resources. And so if let's say we're halfway in the project and something comes up and we want to change one of the features or one of the scopes of the pitch, um, that's where we could kind of take a step back and say, hey, look, let's look at what the budget allows. Okay, we have 30 hours. And typically this wouldn't happen. It's hard to say what would happen in a 2 week project. It's pretty much in a 4 to 6 week project where there's a lot
Yeah.
more hours.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so we do allow some changes for that. I think we're very very quick to as soon as a client starts throwing out new ideas, we're already making a new pitch, and we do it kind of live for them in Notion. They can see the board of all the ideas, and so that, okay, yeah, let's get that idea down. So we start a new project, and all of a sudden they start, oh wait, that's more money. Like, he just created a new project. That's a new bill. That's a new contract, which is fine, and that's why we kind of validate those ideas. But we will typically like capture it some way, and then we'll see if it will fit into an existing. Sometimes we start that process and we say, hey, this is actually only a 1 week or 2 week project. It's pretty small. We have about 2 weeks worth of budget left in the 6 weeks. Do you want to swap this for that? We'll literally copy the scopes of or features of work out of that pitch and create a new pitch so we can come back to that other idea
I see.
later. And so
Yeah.
they're moving modules around. And I think as long as you can show that with integrity, and here's the exact hours we're spending, here's how much time, it makes it really simple, actually. It
It's
sounds
very
complex
transparent.
to track it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of from the standpoint of the client having ideas about wanting a change in direction. What about kind of from the inside? Let me just contrast it with a lot of dev shops. They'll start a project with very precise, high fidelity drawings of what the final interface is supposed to look like, and then
Yeah.
they treat the development work as the realization, or the like kind of almost like animating life into these very precise drawings.
Yes.
And the expectation is that like this drawing that we saw at the beginning is going to become software at the end,
Yeah.
and the software is going to look like the drawing. How What's the level of detail that you're committing to in the pitch, and how much room do you have to kind of creatively adjust what that final software looks like compared to
Right.
the thing that you agreed on?
So this is where I think what is one thing that's very unique about us. Like, we are not the high fidelity design piece. Like, we'll use modules, and typically, I mean, we may do some, instead of a fat marker sketch, we may do just a little bit more of an elaborate sort of pencil drawing of what it could look like. But we are not there to refine the shade of the color and the this. Those, we try to get it functional first, and a lot of our clients have to buy into that. They are very much in sort of a functionality first kind of process. It's not, we don't, they're not shooting for this world's most beautiful UI right up front. And so I joke with our team that the way we really speed up this process is we just don't let designers on the team. So as an engineer, we know, like, oh, that's quite refreshing. Like, I can just look at the pitch, we can go build it, and then we will have someone go through at the end, right? And we talk about it, again, house analogy. We got to get the walls up. We got to get the door in the right place, the floors, it needs to structurally stand up. We can have a lot of conversations about what color to paint the wall, or where
Yeah,
that
you can
picture
do a lot of
goes.
finishing.
Finishing, yeah.
Yeah.
We watch a lot of HGTV, that stuff comes at the very end. But it does, I agree, it does make it feel friendly. It makes it feel fun and easy to use. But a lot of it, we try and think through what's the simplest way we can deliver this project. So, and that's part of that pitch process. We're iterating on paper before we are iterating in code and design software. And so we try to simplify, and we involve all parts of our team. It's not just me and the clients or our product manager. We involve the developers, in that process, and they can kind of point out and start to help us think about, okay, just adding this one little automation, that's actually going to add 2 weeks of work, to the whole scope of the project. And, or it's going to add all this unnecessary complexity that's not, that we can probably work around if we just simplified in here and here. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but just really it's yeah.
Yeah, that does answer it. So that's interesting to hear you say that, because this is something I've also been doing on some of the projects that I'm working with, and I've been noticing that this is actually a difference from when I was at Basecamp. There was a very kind of a strict idea of how a team works, which is that there was a designer and programmer working in tandem all the time. And I started working on some side projects where I was the designer and I had a programmer who was building the work that I was shaping, and I didn't have the time to be there along the way.
Right.
So I needed to be able to focus this as basically just a development task. And what I discovered was that like everything actually got easier because there was already a lot of hip bone connects to the leg bone type stuff in the pitch, or like to use your house analogy, there's going to be a hallway between this
Yeah.
bathroom and that bedroom, right? And so there are basic relationships that are actually design. They are actually kind of very much from a product point of view, like this needs to be there and it needs to connect to this in this way. But there's no like measurements or specific dimensions of like this box needs to be this tall and be this shape and stuff like that. And what I found was that like it kind of freed up the programmer to take an approach that like I'm just learning how to talk about this, but we've been calling it a parts wired up on the floor
Hmm.
approach.
Yes.
It's like when you buy a stereo system, you don't like immediately take it out of the box and mount it on the wall. Like
Right.
first you like plug you put it on the floor, and then you plug it in and you put the cables between everything, and then you try and see like, does this work?
Hmm.
And do I understand how this thing like turns on and connects? And then when you're sure about it, then you actually like do the fine mounting and stuff like that. So I've actually been doing a lot more in this kind of finishing round, instead of kind of integrating into the cycle. And it's very much against the trend in the industry
Yeah.
right now. But I think we're going to see a return back to that.
I think this is something that's helpful for clients. You mentioned a little bit ago about saying no to clients, right? Like that's
Hmm.
something we say no a lot in that discovery process so that they get a sense of what it's going to be like to work with us. Now, I mean, what I mean by that, like we're not just saying yes to everything because of most, I think,
Hmm.
developers, look, anything is possible if you put enough hours
Exactly.
and money into it and you don't have, like, and so I just think, what we're saying is, hey, I know you want to think about it this way. And a lot of times clients come to us and say, hey, in 6 months, we're going to do this massive launch and I want to work for 6 months and then build it all up and then let users in this big wow. And we immediately are like red flag. Like let me tell you why that's a bad idea. And
Yeah.
so
Uh-huh.
we're saying no, we're iterating on that. And, because we've kind of niched down on who we're working with, these smaller teams, they don't have infinite budgets. And so we're continually bringing it back to the dollars kind of conversation and saying, what's the least money you could put in to get the highest return as far as getting users to solve whatever problem they're trying to solve.
Hmm.
And that conversation, the design uh, kind of slips away very quickly, right? And a
That's
lot of
so
clients,
interesting.
yeah, and you know what I'm talking about, that kind of finishing UI. I think
Yeah.
UX and all that's important,
The
and
graphic
we're
design
fans.
element. Hmm.
Yeah, we're huge fans of Tailwind and Tailwind UI, so we use a lot of
Yep.
components to solve, and so it looks nice. It doesn't look. We don't want to make it look ugly,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
it's not going to that like crazy custom design area, which I think a lot of development teams, because they start there, they build these high fidelity, interactive kind of
Right.
prototypes, and then they hand that off at the last part of the project to the developer and say, no,
Hmm.
build this, and then you run into all the problems. So um, I think that's something that has been unique to us, is to keep bringing back to that money conversation, and I think that's where I've found that being sort of the founder of our company and having done this for 11 years, and then talking founder to founder on that side and saying, hey, I know where trying to get, you got a certain budget associated with, like, allocated for this. How can we get this functional? Because a lot of times this is either hurting their bottom line, right? There's inefficiencies in their
Mm.
company. They need a tool to solve some sort of
Uh-huh.
problem. And now
Uh-huh.
this is actually hurting them, or keeping them from scaling. So we're
Totally.
a lot of our stuff is we talk about building systems that scale, and we're helping them scale their business. So they see that they need this tool to help go to the next level with their business. And so we kind of talk in those terms, like, again, the design and what shade of blue and all that stuff goes away very quickly. Um,
Mm.
and it's such an easy thing to change at the end. And I think um, that's where, once you kind of do that with a client and they get it functional, they get it in their hands quick. And so we always, like, sometimes have like a black and white ugly version that will literally
Yep.
white text, black background, we'll
Ugly
give it
but
to them,
working.
ugly but working. And so
Yeah.
we had a tablet app that we did recently. We just loaded all the videos. They had 1,000 videos. that had to be imported into this library. So we went ahead and started that on day one, built this ugly version. You could browse, you could search, you could get around all the videos. There
Mm-hmm.
was not one color on the entire app, and we literally
Mm-hmm.
gave the APK to the client, let them load it up, let them play with it. And they're like, if there's just this gut reaction, like, is this what it's gonna look like? Is this, is this, I was like, but look how like everything works, right? We're solving bugs.
Well,
They
and
went
that's where
into
the
some,
risk is. This is the
right,
thing, is that like actually
yeah,
getting all that stuff to work is the hard part.
yeah,
And making things beautiful is also hard. But for most software projects, actually, I spent some time on this because I was actually working on a product that's in private beta now. And uh, we had to decide sort of how far do we go on kind of making it beautiful and rounding all the corners and doing color schemes and stuff like that. And I had to try and understand like what is actually important about this work. Why are we
hmm,
doing this finishing work? And the conclusion we came to was that we need to do the finishing needs to be good enough that it doesn't get rejected,
yeah,
but it's not actually a differentiating factor
right,
unless you are literally in fashion or entertainment or something like that. It's simply not a differentiating factor, but
yeah,
it is something that can get you eliminated. Where
yeah,
someone looks at the product and they say, "Oh, this I don't trust this because it looks so raw." So, and
right,
this is something where like Tailwind is such an amazing thing because it gets you just to that level,
hmm,
of like this looks respectable. This looks like it was made by professionals, but you're not like kind of inventing some kind of
right. Well,
custom visual.
and it's so building on a flexible framework like Tailwind means that, and when we do put that in the that first version there, if it's black and white, we are using Tailwind to make it look that way, so that when
Hmm.
we do have a front end
It's easy to
designer
layer
developer
in.
go in and we actually if we have a designer, sometimes that's me, sometimes someone else, they'll go in and design it at the code level.
That's fantastic.
So
It's also
and
very
yeah,
satisfying, isn't it?
it's
Like
so satisfying.
when everything is already working, and then you as the designer get to go like spruce it up, and you can
Yes,
also literally move furniture around because
yes,
when the components are factored properly, you can move things around on the views without breaking anything.
yeah,
And I love that moment because like that, it's I mean it's just
it,
like a house, right? Like the
yeah,
finishing is kind of where it all comes together, and then you
yeah.
are like, oh wow, and it's really satisfying as a designer not to kind of just deliver these pieces and then wait and wait and
Hmm.
wait, but instead like have all the raw things working and then instantly get results on things.
It's yeah, because then and you solve so many problems without having real content or real functionality in.
Yes. Hmm.
And so when you see, for example, you trying to load 1,000 videos into a page, there's unique problems like what does that loading
Hmm.
experience look like? How does
Totally.
so you're actually seeing the end result, and then as a designer you can actually solve those unique like things, because you could go off into design software, make it look pretty, send it back to the developer, they make it look the way you want, and then you go to actually use it, and that end user experience is not great because they're sitting there
Yeah.
waiting for all this stuff to load, and no one ever thought to like segment this or break it down and think through that final user experience. um and
The
now
thing about
yeah,
load time kind of reminds
yeah,
me about how I often think about UX in terms of both like space or time. And like high fidelity mockups are all spatial. They're two dimensional, right? And it's like a colored dot in some XY position. But there's usually very little awareness of time and process
hmm,
in these mockups. And one of the things I've been thinking about lately with some projects I'm doing is like there's certain moments in an app where if it happens too fast, it's actually bad.
hmm,
Like where you actually need to kind
it's
of
so
have a
true,
moment of ceremony or a moment of confirmation or a
yeah,
moment of like, is this really happening? Oh yeah, this is really happening now. I
yeah,
think like TurboTax is like amazing at this. Like they have these different moments where they slow you down and they be like, now you have this and you have that. Are you ready to move on or not? And that kind of stuff, like you can really feel it when the parts are already wired. If you need to kind of put in that, like if you have to put in a speed bump or not, but you don't really feel that up front very well.
that's so true. And yeah, yeah, you can definitely make things too fast, and I think that's where keeping that team shallow, not shallow, but like as small as possibly you can make it. It lets
Hmm.
us iterate faster between that. Going back to the leadership team, the clients who have this buy-in, they may be having their solution may be all about hosting your videos in this amazing, cool way. But if we're
Hmm.
not taking that extra second, like those 4 or 5 seconds, like we have a client,
Yeah.
we're doing a decentralized video hosting solution. It's really cool. So we're working right now on like the loader, you upload it and then there's the video, right? That's how the design, the developer built it. It's super fast, super efficient. But now from a user experience, like I've paid this premium to have this decentralized hosting for my videos. So we made a little thing that's like a little graph that's just a bar, and as it's growing, it's saying, okay, we're uploading to all these nodes. Okay, we're sharing it. Okay, we're encrypting it. Okay, we're doing this, and just kind of breaking that a little bit of what's going behind the scenes.
Hmm.
Um, and then saying, okay, yeah, now your video is like optimized and ready for
Hmm.
publishing or whatever. And it just made
Yeah,
it kind of a
totally.
fun thing, and it just reminds them like, okay, yeah, this is why we're using this tool. Like this is why it's
Hmm.
those little interactions. But um, and again, to go back to the clients part of this and design, and kind of summarize the design part, when we do it in the code, what we'll do is we'll ask for a lot of inspiration. So we had the clients send us like, what do you think looks really good? And then we'll put the two side by side. So they may show us like for this video solution, they may show us a Netflix or Discovery Plus or
Hmm.
one of these new streaming platforms. And
Hmm.
the changes they wanted were so tiny. It was that they wanted the video thumbnails to be rounded corners. They
Oh,
wanted to have
interesting.
the text the certain size. It was so small that on a 6 week build, I
Oh,
think we
that's so
spent
fascinating.
maybe 2 or 3 days at the end just changing the design. And then, of course, the clients, we had been telling them for 6 weeks, we can change it at the end, we can change it at the end. And I don't know if they believed us. And then on
Hmm.
Monday, we showed them, hey, here's that ugly version. And that was all the bugs solved. We're kind of in the 5th week of the 6 week cycle. And by Wednesday, we were like, and here's the design, like
This
finished. And
transformation
all of a sudden,
happens.
they were
Yeah,
like, "Whoa, you guys are amazing!"
that's so
And we're
cool.
the
That's really
heroes. And we're
great.
like, "We told you," and it happens like that.
It's
Yeah.
it's so interesting. That makes me think of something my one of my mentors, Bob Mesta, talks about a lot is whenever we're trying to create satisfaction, we actually need to understand like what are the things that actually cause the satisfaction? What are the things that signal to the customer that this is what they like this that this is like the right thing. And like when it comes to design, a lot of times designers have their own ideas about like kind of what is important or right
Right.
or the correct way. And to hear from the client that the like rounded corners are going to signal to them that like this
Yes.
is the way that they want it to be. It's so cool to have like precise things. Like these are the things that they're going to see
Hmm.
that are going to tell them that this is a good design, as opposed
Right.
to that, whatever. It follows according to some trend, or it follows according to some, whatever. Something that the design police tell you that you have to do.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I think, and it's those efficiencies that, again, it always comes back to like that hard deadline of 6 weeks, right? We only have that finite amount of time to do a certain level of design work. Now,
Hmm.
and that may require the complexities of this 6 week project require 5.5 weeks of just back end development,
Yep.
front end, making sure all the components are built. And the last little piece, that's all we can allow for that. And sometimes we will do a second project, a 2 week project, a 4 week project, where we'll just do UI and upgrade stuff and
Hmm.
make that extra nuance, and we'll detail all that. But again, it's something the clients are investing in, right? They
Yeah,
have to
and
go
then you also have to shape it, right? You have to figure out like,
shape it.
well,
Yep.
so at the end of this 2 weeks, if we're going to do this UI round at the end of the 2 weeks, how do we know that we got there?
Yeah.
And what does it entail? Like, I love that. I love like putting that as a separate thing that they're paying for, because then you get to define all the expectations around it.
Hmm.
That's great.
And we ask them to think about, okay, so you're looking at this, you're looking at that. Okay, what do you want us to change in these 2 weeks? And so they'll come up with something. Okay, we want it to look like this. And typically on the fly, I'll kind of say, you know what, that's probably like 10 hours. Okay, you've got 50 hours left.
Uh
How would you
huh.
like to? Okay, well, we want this. And the funny thing is, most of the times the clients can't even fill that 60-hour gap, because
Right.
actually what they wanted was just like 2 or 3 things. And if they have to think deeply about it, and not just have these kind of gut reactions to things and just throw tasks at us. Um, it just makes us think deeply about it and makes us like articulate exactly what is going to be done ahead of time. So
Hmm.
um, there's so many different ways we could go as far as chatting. I do have like one thing I did want to touch on, which I think is really unique to clients is, and I think you talked about this in a recent blog post about feature work versus reactive work.
Yes,
So maybe if you
very
want to,
different.
yeah, if you want to define that for us for a second, then I'll kind of tell you how we have interpreted that.
Well, just the thing that I've seen is that when you have a limited number of people who are supposed to be working on a product, and I'll speak to it from the product side, not from the client side, that there's the work that comes from, you know, shaping and setting an appetite and having a business objective and having an idea about like this is the thing that we want to go pursue strategically. That's very different from somebody is on the phone and something is on fire and we have to go do it now, you know. And there's always stuff coming up that kind of has that urgency to it. And when there's urgency coming from somebody else who needs something from you right away, that just doesn't fit into this shape up universe, you know, because the shape up universe is all about negotiating a package of work, lining up the resources to do it, and then delivering it further into the future,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so the simple observation there is don't take shape up as some religion of how to make software, but view it as a way to deal with your capacity to reach a certain type of strategic objective.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you have a lot of this kind of stuff coming up which is driven from support or driven from somebody in some other department who needs fast results from you because of the way you're organized, whatever it is, like you actually have to reserve capacity for that, you
Right.
know, because the only way to do it is to reserve capacity for it and to use actually a different process, something more like a kanban driven process, instead of a shape up process for that.
Absolutely. And that, so we read that blog post a couple months ago. I think that you wrote that, and immediately our team was just like, "This makes so much sense to us," because most of the time, once it's when the product goes live, when you put it in front of people's hands, then
Yes.
the little quirky bugs show up and things we didn't
Yep.
catch because it's not going to be perfect
Hmm.
because it was
And
built
there's going to be
twice.
urgency attached to those things. It's you can't just kind of say, well, we're just going to pile it up and then do it in some cycle in the future.
Exactly. And so, you know, and then you've got the varying levels of this is high, you know, priority. This is critical, you know, this is, and it just goes
Hmm.
escalated into, you know, whatever. And I think what we've had to do is you know, when those come in, we do use kind of a Kanban like board style in Notion where we will track, we call it the client inbox column. So they can
Yep.
throw
Hmm.
whatever they want to at any given point, and then we have like our Innovo column. So if we catch bugs, we throw them in there, and then we actually have a
Hmm.
column that says scheduled. And so in this column,
Yep.
this is where we actually decide of all the things we have and all the things you have, the client, like what are we actually going to go work on? And
Hmm.
only when it's in scheduled does our team react to that project. So it creates this
Yep.
buffer to kind of get rid of the urgency, you know, the crazy email that comes in at midnight, like that stuff. So we kind of create this buffer, and then we can kind of look at, okay, we've got this 6 week project. Now remember, we only have the one developer, the one product manager for that client. And
Uh-huh.
so
Right.
the way we've solved this, and we used your blog post that you did on this as kind of a framework for this, is we have the feature work, the projects that people are paying for, 2, 4, 6 week projects. It's the only thing we sell at our company. And then we introduced a monthly maintenance subscription, right?
Ah, very good.
For
Hmm.
20 hours. I'm just giving away all the secrets. 20 hours, fixed price. It's attached to a credit card, bills on the first of the month, shows up, you know,
Hmm.
so it gets paid automatically. And
Hmm.
those 20 hours are they're just the excess stuff. It's kind of like
Excellent.
you guys work the 6 weeks and then you work the 2 weeks. We basically do
Hmm.
this 2 weeks kind of idea, but we just have it sprinkled in. And again, we have that conversation with the client. Hey, we're going to take this developer off this. It may push this other wonderful feature that you had in mind to launch at this. We're going to take an extra day or two and just solve this issue because that's so critical and is an emergency. And then we can have that conversation. I would say for those types of, we've maybe had a handful of those in the last six
Hmm.
months, right? actual emergencies, actual times where it is
Right.
drop everything and fix it.
Yeah. True crises are rare.
True
Yeah.
crisis, yeah, and defining what that crisis actually looks like, um, because sometimes it's just, there's certain things we can do that's just a quick fix for it. There's workarounds. Sometimes it's just communicating better with the users. It's not always throw it to the developer and solve it, right?
Exactly. Well, this
Yeah.
is a great point about how when you have actually also reserved finite capacity for dealing with the reactive work,
Hmm.
it actually it protects you from this. Well, first of all, this problem where the developers are constantly pulling tickets of stuff that's broken, because the conveyor belt of broken stuff is never ending.
Yes.
It's just that a lot of it doesn't deserve the time, right? So
Right.
that's one thing. But the other thing that is a problem that happens is a kind of hyperinflation of priority flags. Like when there's kind of an open-ended amount of time to deal with bugs, then in order to get your bug to go front in line, it
Yeah.
needs to be priority with 8 red flags on it, and then
Yes.
15 red flags on it, and then and but if you only have a fixed number of hours on a rotating basis, then
Mhm.
you can only manage to get the top 5 or 10 or things
Right.
anyway. You know what I mean? So it brings a kind of a healthy market to the prioritizing process.
Absolutely. And we one thing trick we do with that is when the project comes in, we will throw an hour estimate at it, and it sits there. So they have, here's your crazy hot lava double red flag whatever project.
Hmm.
That's a 6 hour project, and the way we in the scheduled column, it just totals up all our hours and says, hey, there's your 20 hours for the month. Are you happy for us to spend all of November
I love
fixing
that. So
just these
there's an
three
element of
things?
negotiation also
Yeah.
with the bug fixing.
Oh,
That's
everything's a
fantastic. That's
negotiation.
that's fantastic. This is
Yeah.
this is I hope this video is available afterward for a lot of people
Yeah,
to watch, because
absolutely.
actually I think this is this point of how work should be a negotiation is coming up again and again, and it's such a fundamental thing. I think it's a really good one.
Absolutely. Um, and I think again, this has taken us, I would say a full year and a half to kind of get it to this point. We're still working out bugs. It's not perfect, right?
Hmm.
But it's a lot better than it was. And I don't think we could have had this conversation this time last year. I think it was still too new. We're still trying to figure out the actual constraints of the process,
Hmm.
because we had to basically build a business model around your book, which
Interesting.
is I'm not sure if anyone else is doing that. I think people have implemented ShapeUp as a process, a product like workflow. We basically turned and stopped doing every other project we were doing, and we only sell a 2, 4, and a 6 week project,
Hmm.
and then this maintenance package. Those are the only three
Hmm.
things you can buy from us, 4 things, and it just simplified things tremendously. And I think it's really a service when you actually love and care about your clients, about the people you're serving. Then that is something that you have to do. You have to go to that next level of simplifying it, breaking it down, making it easy to
Absolutely.
understand. And I think that little extra bit of service to the client, in the process, in using this process, we kind of have to sometimes drag them there kicking and screaming a little bit to get them to the process. But I think I would say most of our clients, when they kind of grasp it, and it's typically in month 2, 3, 4, right? It's not the first few weeks; it's the first few
Hmm.
months. They grasp it and they're like, okay, I get it. So I can have these ideas. I can prioritize what I want this whole team to be working on. So I think when a founder or a leadership person like basically sees that, it kind of puts them in the driver's seat and says, okay, you tell us what's priority. You understand the costs involved. You understand the time involved. You make the best, most informed decision now. It's not, like I said, just throwing hours at stuff. It's not this kind of haphazard, just keep building until we decide it's done. And I think that's like a way to deliver a high quality product with integrity to your clients.
Totally. I love the driver's seat point. That's exactly the feeling that I had throughout trying to put the book together. Was like that kind of should be the theme throughout the whole thing. Is how do we actually feel like we're in control of what we're spending time on, and getting what we invested into, like getting out what we
Yeah,
wanted to get out at the end.
absolutely. That's cool. There's like one or two questions here. I know we're kind of up on an hour. Do you want to take one or two questions from
Oh,
people
sure. Yeah, we
here?
could take a look at the questions.
Sure. So this was question saying, are there any chapters or insights since writing the book that you would add if you were writing it today? It's a great question.
Yeah, well, there's a lot that's not in the book, and the thing that I had to sort of figure out, I had to figure out also like where does the book stop, and how do I shape the book so it was something that I could actually write and finish and wasn't some never-ending thing, you know. And one of the things that I was telling myself for the book was if it gives people language for a lot of things that they aren't talking about, weren't talking about before enough, like appetite, like unknowns, like discovered work, like a level of abstraction, you know, like fixed time variable scope, like all this kind of stuff. If it gave people the language for that, and it started to enable people to talk differently about the work that they were doing and just kind of understand its different, to have this perspective shift, then it would be a success. And now what I'm seeing is that like I'm quite surprised by how the book is spreading. It's I'm hearing from so many people who are using the terminology now. There are so many companies now that use the word shape that didn't before, and it's just been a word of mouth thing. And then the all the next wave of struggles are appearing now. So companies are there. For example, there's companies who have adopted. They're shaping, they're writing pitches, they're having a betting table, but actually the process of breaking down the work, for example, into scopes
Mhm.
and actually executing one piece at a time and getting the meaningfully hard things done first, you know, and actually addressing the unknowns first. This is something that isn't really explained in the book. Like how do the teams actually take that pitch and turn it into work and sequence that work and solve and like surface the right problems in the right order. A lot of times it's funny because like this shower to code thing, it's kind of like the shower part gets slowed down. So there's this like slowing down into a thoughtful pitch. But then when the pitch goes to the programmers, they just go straight into code.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've been working on lately is I've been iterating on a process with a few companies to actually kind of slow down that process of transforming the pitch into an implementation approach and catching a lot of problems there much earlier that would take months, you know, not months, that would take weeks to run into otherwise. So that's been a big thing. So actually, like how to actually break down the work, how to like what. It's funny. There's still a lot of struggle around what goes into a pitch and how to make sure that the intent of the pitch isn't lost when it goes over to the team, and how to kind of hand over that
Mhm.
responsibility without losing the meaning of it, you know. Because what can happen is a pitch can sometimes be too supply side, where it's just saying like build this and build that, and there's
Yeah.
not enough of a kind of a problem and desired outcome wrapped around it, so that when the team who's programming faces a trade-off, that they can understand whether to turn right or turn left, you know. And so like getting that motivation in there and actually figuring out how to incorporate the demand side into the pitch is also something that people can struggle with sometimes. So there's a ton of stuff about like how to actually do it, you know,
Right.
basically like how do you actually do it and how do you actually transition from where you are to being successful with this. There's just a ton to do there. So a lot of the work that I'm doing right now is kind of inspired by finding out about those problems, and then I've built some software actually to address it. And then there's also a lot of stuff that I've been writing that will probably find its way into some kind of a future book, I could imagine, which is a much more hands dirty, step by step, what to actually
Okay.
do. You know, now that the concepts and the language are established.
Yeah. You need like a shape up handbook or like a manual or something that's
Yeah,
like
totally.
very
Yeah.
practical. Yeah.
Yeah, like what does it
Um,
actually look like to shape? Really, you
exactly.
know, like what are the tools in the shed that you reach for, and in what order do you reach for those tools, and what does it look like for that clay or that marble to change over time?
That's excellent. So that's a good segue into where's best place to follow you if there are people wanting more resources. I know you're writing
Mm.
in a couple places.
Yeah, best thing would be just to go to my website, feltpresence.com, and from there you'll see a link to the newsletter, and you can sign up to the email newsletter. And my writing is happening right now is through the newsletter. if I bump into something, if I get a reader question that's interesting and it prompts something, then I'm kind of basically prototyping all the stuff that'll go into new tooling and a new book through the newsletter. So that's the main thing. And I'm also on Twitter, RJS, and you'll see little bits from time to time there as well.
Excellent. Well, maybe one day we'll do a part two. I feel like we just opened up a lot of different threads. So, I hope this was helpful
Totally,
for
there's a lot
people.
there.
There's a lot there. And I think, it's probably could be done over, there's probably like a shape up boot camp or something maybe in the future of helping clients like take 8 weeks or 90 days to like implement this. So, but, thanks so much, Ryan, for jumping in here, just being willing. I think it's almost midnight for where you're at. So thanks for hanging out with us and just sharing some thoughts. This was super encouraging to us, and I hope everybody got value out of it. So we will talk to you soon. Thanks.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks a lot. Very exciting to hear what you've done with it. Very impressed. So thanks for sharing.